Apologies for the delay. Um, I see I'm a few minutes after the time I said, but I just was setting up and I realized I had to upload. Just knock off the YouTube video there because I was hearing myself back. But hello to all of you there. I see Mr. Murtad, Andrew, and who else? I saw Dragon as well, and Vilnius. So hello to everyone. If I've missed anyone out, apologies. So today I'm just going to focus on the Chinese sources. Someone asked me a few days ago to go through them and to maybe unpack them a bit and explain what I see as the significance of them. When I put the video out, I think it was about a week ago. To my mind, they were self-explanatory, and obviously I've been at this for quite a while, so I thought they were all pretty obvious, but maybe um, they're not always so obvious, and it's worth going over them and explaining them. So just going to check a few things before we get started. First of all, are you all able to hear me okay? And can you see the PowerPoint? So if you just give me a one if everything is going okay. There's a bit of a lag in terms of when I see your comments. So let me just see if I can open up PowerPoint just to see that you're seeing it. Audio is okay. I think we're good to go. Okay. Right. So let's get cracking. So I suppose the first thing to point out was that I can see Chinese sources in red over a map of China. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That's great. So the first thing I'm going to focus on here is the fact that there's a reference to the beginning of the Arab kingdom in 618, and the Chinese consistently refer to the Arab kingdom as the Dashi. Now, if you've been following this channel for a number of years, you will know that the Dashi is the Chinese way of saying the Taye or the Tayaye. Now, there's the Syriac version and the Arabic version, but essentially, in the Chinese rendering, it's Dashi. And two significant things there is that we have a reference by invoice in 651 to the fact that they had been begun in 618 based on how many years they said that the kingdom was in place. But also there's a reference to the 100th anniversary of the Dashi in 719, and this was given to us by a narrative of the Dashi envoy dispatched to Tang. No, so I was wrong. This was a letter that was sent to the Chinese for help from Kang, which would be the Samarkand kingdom, or Samarkand even. I'll get this right. I'm a bit slow this evening. So we have two independent sources that indicate that Islam, or the Tayyaye, probably better to say, the movement, the revolution, as it were, started in 618 and not 621 or 622 or any other year. Why there's a difference of opinion in terms of, even within the Islamic narrative, in terms of why did they go to 621? It's hard to say why they moved it later. Maybe decades later they felt, well, things didn't really kick off until the 620s, and maybe they decided to move it then. It's hard to know. But in any case, that's a starter. Now, with these dates here, say on the left hand side, 638 AD. So the Chinese record that this information, these bits of information, were recorded with the year of the Chinese emperor, which would be, like, for example, the 12th year of Zhen Guan. And the 638 AD is it's rendered into the year that we know. So this 638 AD isn't in the Chinese record. This is our rendering of it, okay? But we can work it out from the 12th year of Zhen Guan. Hope that makes sense. So in that year, 638, so this would be 20 years after the beginning of the Dashi or the Taiyaye kingdom. The Chinese say that they received an envoy named Muo Siban from the Poshi, which is the Persia. Okay. And this is found in the New Book of Tan. Now, what's interesting as we'll go forward is that as the decades go by, and even as we get well into the period in which the Persians, according to the standard Islamic narrative, the Persians have been taken over by the Tayyaye. But what we find is an alternative version from the Chinese, which is that the Persians seem to have kept their independence for quite a while until eventually we start seeing them seeking help from the Chinese. So this is massive. Okay. Now, we go on to 639 the following year. Received envoys again from the Persians. 647, so there's a bit of a jump. Now we're, I'm not going to count how many years since the beginning of the Tayyaye, so but you can work it out, 47 minus 18, whatever that is. Received envoys presenting tribute from the Persians, essentially. Okay, so it's well into the period that you'd expect that the Persians have been taken over. So why is that? Well, my view is that when the Tayyaye took over in Persia, what they did was they had a deal with the Parthians, and the Parthians wanted to kick out the Sasanians, and essentially they took over, and the deal that they made with the Arabs was simply, you can rule. All we want is access to the trading posts, the lucrative trading posts that go all the way through Iran and into, as you can see on the map, if you just imagine a line going east all the way to China. They just wanted access to that because that's where the money was made in the trade route between China and places like Iran and Iraq. That's what they initially just wanted. The fact that they didn't want or didn't attempt a full all-out conquest is probably a sign that they weren't strong enough at that point. Just so they settled for a semi-autonomous situation. But that was to change later as they grew in power. Okay, so I think a lot of what we're finding here in these sources, even though they're quite short, you might think there's nothing much to them, but actually they tell us quite a lot. Right, so we move on a little bit further. The Persians are continuously sending tributes of different kinds, gifts and so on, to keep the Chinese happy, keep a good relationship. It might seem odd, why are they sending these gifts? Well, there's good economic reasons for it. Keeping with the Chinese at the time meant that they would have a good trading relationship, which meant that they could sell things to China and also buy things from China. So it's a mutual thing. Now, we're only seeing one half of it as well. We're not seeing, for example, the Chinese convoys going to Persia. It's likely that they sent envoys that way as well. So it's not necessarily just a one-way street here. Okay, so 648 received envoys from the Poshi, the Persians again. And then we go to 651. Now, 651 is a significant year. So if we look to the right, it says that the Dashi sent its first envoy with tributes to our Tang royal court. The envoys told us that their king's surname was Dashi, which is reference to the Tayyaye. So they're identifying themselves with this tribal group called the Tayyaye. Now, who were the Tayyaye? Well, they originally came from way down in Yemen, that neck of the woods, or southern Saudi Arabia. And then about the 3rd or 4th century, they moved up to places like Syria and Iraq, and they covered quite a large area. Some of the Tayayi would have been in the Lakhmid area, which would have been in the east, and some would have been spread over into the Ghaznid area. Now, in order for them to establish themselves as a state, there must have been some unification between both camps, as it were, because they had been acting as a buffer zone, essentially, between the Persians and the Byzantines, okay, or the East Romans, if we're to be historically correct here. So at that time, Mesopotamia, which would be northern Iraq, was known as Tashkistan, which literally means land of the Tay, or Tayi or Tayayi. That's the same thing. Okay, so that's that. And just moving on then. A little bit later in 651. Oh no, actually, I think it's the same year, same time. Sorry, same time. They give us this story. This is a key story. You will have seen me refer to this before. Dashi situates in the west of Persia. Okay, now that caused me a bit of confusion because clearly Iraq is not in Persia, but I think from the perspective of the time, the Persian Empire would have spread into parts of eastern Iraq. I think that's probably what they mean by that. During the year of Daye of Su dynasty, there was a Persian man herding camels in the mountain Jufin Modina. Now, this story, which the Tayaye told the Chinese, was their origin myth story. Because there's such a short time lapse between 618 and 651, there wasn't a whole lot of time for it to gain legs or to become completely legendary. So I would imagine that at least a good part of this would have been accurate. Now, in terms of him being a Persian man, it's hard to know 100%. Do they literally mean Persian in the sense that we would understand it, in terms of the strict boundaries of Persia? Or was it someone that belonged to the Persian Empire? So just living in eastern Iraq could have counted as that. So a lot of that hinges on how you define Persia at that time. Now, what's significant about this person is that they were herding camels in the mountain. Okay, so this person must have been a wealthy person, presumably, for this to be significant. We're not talking about someone with a few camels. I think it must mean that it's someone with quite a large number of camels and perhaps involved in the trade route, because the camels would have been used for that very purpose. I'm obviously speculating a little bit. Now, the time frame there, in terms of when this happened, sometime between 605 and 618. We know that Iyas ibn Kapisa was a ruler in that time frame. What we don't know if he was exactly the person that is mentioned here. He certainly would fit the bill to some extent, but then in terms of his age bracket at that stage, it is highly unlikely that he could have continued all the way through as Umar, in the later sort of history, go, all the way to 644. That might be something of a stretch. So I'm sort of 50-50, short of having additional information. I've kind of gone back on the fence 50-50 on that one. The crucial thing is there's no reference to ES after 618 that I can find, so it's very hard to know. Okay, so what else? He says, one day a lion-man appeared out of nowhere telling him, there are 3 caves on the west side of Jufin Modina. Now, Modina sounds very much like Medina. Jufin, I think we spoke about this before, and I can't remember the name of the place that we mentioned. It escapes me, but we're talking about a place that Medina could easily refer to something city. So Jufin could be like Kufa, actually, that was the place. Kufa city could very well fit this, but it's still not 100% clear. So a lineman, we discussed what might be meant by a lineman before. One possibility is that it could be refer to royalty. Okay. Another possibility is that maybe it's a bit like a camel man. A lineman could be someone who keeps lions. It's not crazy suggestion considering that various wild cats were sent to China as gifts. So that it could be something as simple as that. Now, there's been other suggestions, that is it some sort of connotation of something spiritual, like an angel, appeared out of nowhere telling them there are 3 caves. Maybe it might be that. If it is, then it's kind of, we're now getting into the mythical sort of edge of things. Now it says the lineman told him a large amount of weapons is stored inside the caves and you can go and retrieve them there. And there is also a black stone with text carved on it. You will become the king if you read and do what the carved text on the black stone tells you. So we've discussed this, what it could possibly mean. I don't think we've got any closer, apart from some sort of guesswork on that. But it's interesting that there is a requirement to read or be able to read to be king. So if you read, you will become king. So that's a problem. If this is meant to be Muhammad, that is a major problem. What is the significance of this black stone? Is it the same black stone as what we find in the Temple Mount, or not in the Temple Mount, in the Kaaba? It might be. It might be just a mad coincidence. But there must be something significant in terms of the writing on that. What is the significance? Does owning this black stone confer some sort of rights? Is that what it is? Don't know. So anyway, that's the story. He goes on to say the Persian then followed the lineman's words. I did find a large amount of weapons and the black stone with carved text telling him how to raise an army and rebel against the Persian Sassanid dynasty. I see a question there. Ctesiphon. Could it be Ctesiphon? It could be. Ctesiphon is next to Kufa, so that could work. I see that Lloyd is in the house. Hello to Lloyd. The Chinese destroyed or hid a large number of records they wanted to isolate, so they hid or destroyed earlier history and shut the borders. Yeah, I think the fact that we have any records is quite amazing. But in fairness to them, they have actually kept quite a bit. Now, so moving on, the Persian then recruited fugitives and then crossed the river Hengay, which I'm taken to be the Euphrates, to raid the caravans on the trade route. Okay, now if he was coming from the Persian side and he's crossing the Euphrates, that would suggest he's heading westward. So going from, say, northeastern Iraq to, say, northwesterly Iraq, which might suggest heading towards Syria. Now, there are records of raids into Syria in that time frame, so that would fit in with that. There was a rock inscription that was found, and I can't remember exactly where and when, but I think it was about 100 years or so after these events. And I think the rock inscription was in Syria, as far as I know, and it was on the outside of a church. So that would fit in with this idea of him crossing the Euphrates River and then, heading into places like Syria. Okay. He then claimed himself to be the king and set up a separatist regime in the western part of the Sassanid empires. So if we think of Iran as the Persian Empire, the western part of this, or the Sassanid Empire for that matter, the western side of that would be Iraq, that area. So that's where it's suggesting that he separated himself off from the Persians, setting up his own autonomous state in 618. All right. The newly founded kingdom then repelled and defeated numerous subsequent Persian and Fulan, which is East Roman Empire, invasion forces. Okay, so that really accurately explains what happened in those early years. Now, what's incredible about it is that it's actually saying a lot of these events happened, at least it appears to be that a lot of this happened early. Now, I think what they've probably done, whereas they've started in 618, I think they've compressed the history of the years that followed all into what appears to be 618. I'd imagine that they're now referring, when they're talking about them repelling and defeating numerous subsequent Persians and so on, they're talking really about the 620s there, late 620s and into the 630s. It's just a pity that they didn't include an extra little bit of detail just to make it clearer. Now, then it goes on 654, and the 5 that follows it means the 5th month would be May. Dashi attacks the Persians and Me, which is May Merg, which I've marked on the map. It's sort of like southern Tajikistan, that area. And it says defeats them. Now, I'd imagine we're talking about battles here rather than actual wars where they win the war, but okay. Now, we also have this following. They received Dashi envoy named Yan Muo Niam. Okay, that's in 655. So the Dashi has come twice in the space of 4 years. Not sure how that could be rendered back into an Arabic name. At a guess, I would say Yan could be something like John, or the equivalent of John. I don't know what would be the equivalent in Arabic of John. It looks very similar. Mua Niam, I'm not sure what that could be. If you have any ideas, any suggestions, particularly if you speak Arabic, you might be able to pick out what the name might be. This could be a significant person, considering it's 655. Okay. Now, we have the Persians again. The Persians dispatch envoys telling us of the suffering of repeated attacks from the Dashi and asking for military assistance. So this really is kind of a key piece of evidence that the Persians were still independent. This is decades into the expansion of the Tayaye. Okay. Moving on. Now, the Chinese did send things as kind of rewards. One of the ways of rewarding people was to send titles. So here we have them entitled and promoted the commander of the area of command of Persia, and the person being Peroz as the king of the Persians. So they basically give him a nice title to kind of that he can use to say, "Oh, look what the Chinese gave me," It kind of goes to show how significant the Chinese were for these countries at the time. Now we can see in 663 an awful lot of battles happening here. This would have been the period of Muawiyah. Okay. In this year, Dashi attacks and defeats both the Persians and the Fulan, which is the Byzantines. Dashi troops also march southward and attack Brahmanic countries. So I would take that to be like Pakistan, northern India, and maybe southern Afghanistan. What's incredible is the figure it gives in terms of its military strength: 400,000 soldiers. That's a huge number. Like, even by today's standards, that's huge. So is it any wonder that they were able to conquer these countries eventually with that number? So I'm just going to take a comment here. So the Persians were attacked by the Tayyas. So the Tayyas were Arabs, essentially, yeah. Where it's kind of confusing is the fact that it's kind of like, with multiple identities, you can have, how would you say it? You could be of Indian ethnicity and living in America, so you could call yourself Indian, and you could also call yourself an American. If you were within the empire, you could call yourself Persian, but actually you could identify as Arab as well. Um, and even more complicated, you could actually identify yourself as Syrian and Arab, and well, maybe not necessarily Persian, but maybe at a stretch you might be able to go that far as well. So it's it can vary quite a bit. So just a follow up there. Are you saying Dashi? Yeah. So if I say Dashi, I mean, so Dashi is the Chinese version. Okay. Tayaye and Tayi are the Syriac and Arabic versions of the same name. Why it's different is just simply because of the way people pronounce things and how they transpose words in other languages into their language. So that's the way they did it. It's close enough anyway. Okay, 667. In the month of October, they received tributes from the Persians again. So you can see the Persians are keeping up with the Chinese. They're trying to keep in with them. They're a very important trading partner. And then in 671, the Chinese received envoys from quite a number of countries. So Samarkand, Takharia, Kashmir, and Persia. Okay. And then 673, Peroz, which is rendered in Chinese Bei Lu Shi, personally came and paid homage to the emperor. So essentially, the king of Iran or king of Persia came all the way to China. So why did he do that? It's a good chance that he wanted to build up the diplomatic closeness, because he probably was going to need the Chinese for help if he's going to fend off the Taiyaye. 674. Peroz personally came to the court again, okay, and to pay homage to the emperor. So the last time was 673, so it's literally the following year. Now, if you think of what a long journey that was, that's quite incredible that, 2 years in a row he visited the place. Now, the emperor orders the deputy minister of personnel to escort Perez back to Persia. However, the escort journey got as far as Suiye before returning. Now, it's not clear there, but that seems to suggest that Perez didn't go in the end and came back. That maybe I'm reading it wrong, or maybe the escort just left them to it. I'm not sure. What's your thoughts on that one? It's a bit unclear. But why does Perez not want to go back to Persia? Well, if you were him, would you want to be there where your life is in danger and you're having to fend off against the Taiyaye? You could argue he was a coward, maybe, but I'd imagine it's a fair sign of how dire the situation was in Iran. Okay. Now we also have in 681 the Dashi and Takharia dispatched envoys presenting horses and other exotic products as tribute to Tang. Okay. We also have in 682 envoys came from Dashi and Persia now, who presented tribute. So they're all trying hard to keep in with the Chinese, as you can see. And then in 696, the Chinese received lines as a tribute from the Dashi envoy. So you can see the Taiyaye are trying to keep in with the Chinese. Now, you'd imagine that they would be kind of at this stage, instead of giving gifts to the Chinese, you'd imagine that they might want to go and attack the Chinese. They had a force of 400,000, but they're not stupid. There's a good chance the Chinese could beat them, and they want to keep in with them because of the trade. Okay. Now, 703. So we're now into the early 8th century. This is really when things start to get quite significant, because we're kind of, by the 750s, we're talking about the transition to the Abbasids. And from 703 to, say, 740 is around the time that Mecca was probably started up. And the early myths around Mecca would have been sort of underway. Okay. To whatever extent, it's hard to say, but that would have been the time frame. What's interesting as well is, if we think of Yehuda Nevo, his book Crossroads to Islam, he spoke about the rock inscriptions in relation to Muhammad, and when they start to really kick in is in the 730s. So we're 30 years before that. Okay. Now, actually, just in relation to that, what's a bit of an anomaly in terms of that is the fact that if people are to believe that there were these inscriptions in the Dome of the Rock in the 690s, the mystery that always been is, why did it take 40 years before the story of Muhammad got popularized everywhere? If there was no inscriptions in the Dome of the Rock in the 690s, then we could understand the emergence in the 730s of the Muhammad cult, as it were. But it's kind of strange it took 40 years for it to establish itself. But in any case, 703, the Chinese received horses as tribute from the Dashi. Okay. 706, the Persians visited China. And then in 706 again, received envoys from the Persians and Cambodia presenting tribute. Okay, so it kind of gives the impression, because they're given tribute, that giving tribute suggests like that they are acting as client states to the Chinese. It may not be the case. It might be just diplomatic niceties, but it does seem that way. 708, the Chinese received envoys again from Persia, and again giving tribute. 711, received envoys presenting tribute from the Tayaye or Dashi, from a place called Silla, which I couldn't figure out where that is exactly. Len Yi, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka as well. Okay, I haven't those all marked in the map, by the way. And again, in December 711, the Chinese received envoys presenting tribute from the Dashi. I think that might be the same one, and from Sri Lanka and so on. Okay, right. 716, the month of July, the Dashi visited the Chinese, and there's a few interesting things in here. But they presented golden silk woven robe. Okay. So they obviously receive silk from the Chinese, but they have turned that silk into woven robe. So it's kind of, they're using the Chinese silk, making something nice and giving it back to the Chinese again. They also presented them with jewelry, decorated jade, and a luxurious wine cup as tribute from the king of Dashi, named Heimi Moni. Now, Heimi Moni, I believe the person who was caliph at that time was Suleiman, or Solomon. I think it was Caliph Suleiman in that time frame. So that's how the Chinese rendered the name. Why is this of significance to us? Well, the wine cup, I think, is the most significant thing about it. 100 years before that, Muhammad, if he was real, was meant to have abolished alcohol, banned it. And yet here are the Tayaye given a wine cup. It's kind of like it'd be the equivalent of them giving pork gifts, you know? If they're against alcohol, why are they given a wine cup? It makes no sense, except the story of Muhammad banning alcohol is a myth. It was a hadith that was created much later. And why did they invent that myth? It was probably because at a time when the drunkenness of the Arabs was getting out of hand, that they needed to ban it, and they needed to put that into Muhammad's mouth. Moving on. The leader of Kang, which is Samarkand, sent a letter to the Tang emperor requesting military assistance to fight against the Dashi. It also says the Dashi started 100 years ago, which would be 617, 618. So I think we've referred to that at the beginning. Okay, now we can see that the things are getting a bit more like the standard Islamic narrative says about the this amazing conquest of the lands. Well, now it's getting fearsome, let's say. So it's centuries later. I think they would have compressed all of the stories of the battles way back into the 20s and the 620s and 630s, as if it all happened magically, like a bit of magic. They took over the whole area, but actually the reality is it stretched out a lot longer than they remember it. So now we're in 719. Received invoice from the Persians presenting precious gems. So the Persians obviously are gifting as much as they can, trying to keep the Chinese on side. Received invoice from the Persians again. We have 719, which is and the month of September. The leader of Jumi, which is Kume, sent a letter to the Tang emperor requesting military assistance to fight against the Dashi. Okay, so we're seeing in that area the pattern of the Tayayi just heading northeastwards, through Iran into Afghanistan, into all of these areas. And what route are they taking? They're basically they're invading the areas which are along the Silk Road. Okay, so there is a pattern to this. They're just gradually moving along the Silk Road and establishing bases there and taking over and so forth. Okay, 719, the month of June. The Chinese received invoice presenting tribute from the Dashi, the Tokaria, Samarkand, and southern India. Now, the leader of Avan, which is Bukhara, sent a letter to the Tang emperor requesting military assistance to fight against the Dashi. So all of these references to different leaders in that area seeking military help is significant because it shows really that all of this evidence is corroborates with each other. Now, this area was 100 years into the supposed beginning of Islam. This area wasn't belonging to the Tayyaye, but was being invaded by them. And yet we're meant to believe that al-Bukhari had gotten his hadiths from here, which is impossible really, because if you had a 100-year gap, there's no way that someone living in this area could possibly have access to the hadiths. The only way would be that the person traveled to Iraq or Arabia, wherever the hadiths came from. I would like to think it probably came from Iraq, if any of these hadiths were true to begin with. Okay. Now, 722, the Chinese received invoice dispatched by Buo Shanhua, the king of Persia. I have no idea what that would be, the equivalent. I haven't looked it up. So perhaps someone can recognize that. They can put that in the chat. Who would that be? So in 722, who was the king of Persia at that time? They asked for an official title, and the emperor approved the request. Presumably, this would have helped strengthen their kingdom. And then, almost in response and thanks. 722, the month of October, the Chinese received invoice from the Persians presenting lines as tribute. No, I'm sorry, this is all, was meant to be being triggered one after the other, but essentially let's focus on 723 to 727, sometime in that period. A Korean monk, Heye Cho, learned that the founder of Dashi was originally a camel herder of the Sassanids. Okay. And he learned this while on his way to India. Now, there's no big surprise there because that's exactly what the Chinese heard way back in 651. He also learned that the king of the Dashi was living in a place called Zhao Fulen Lesser, which is north of the Persian capital. That could perhaps be Baghdad or somewhere like that, I would suggest. Maybe it's Hira. I would have to look at the map, but essentially they're saying that the leader is over here. So at that time, I think it was Baghdad that was the place that they were ruling from. I'll have to double check. Now I know Haran was the base in the 740, so it's probably not there. Yeah, any thoughts on that one? I think it's probably somewhere in northern Iraq, based on that. If it's north of the Persian capital, unless they're talking very loosely, Damascus is sort of, it's more west really than north of the Persian capital, maybe northwest. So if they're being very loose with the term, it could perhaps mean Damascus. Okay, moving on. So 724, received invoice from the Dashi presenting horses and incense as tribute. So the Tayai are not stupid. They are trying to butter up the Chinese. Now, just be aware that during these years, it's the Umayyads that are still in charge. 725 in January, the Chinese received diplomatic missions with a group of 13 people with the leader named Suleiman, which sounds very much like Suleiman, from the Dashi, paying homage and presenting horse and incense as tribute. Now, what is his name? Neil Diamond. I think it's Neil Diamond has a song called Suleiman. That's exactly how it's pronounced. Bit of an aside. Okay. Now we're on to 724. I don't know if I've got these ordered correctly. Okay, I've kind of got it the wrong order here, but anyway, 724. Received invoice from the Dashi presenting horses and incense as tribute. Okay. A Poshi tribal chief, Musa Nuo, came to the royal court and paid homage to the emperor. He did not return and stayed and was hired as a palace royal guard. So obviously he doesn't want to go back because things are rough there. I've no idea what that would be in Persian. Any guesses? Musa Nua? Musa's Nua? I think Musa, it could be Musa. Yeah, that could be like Moses. I'm not sure what the Nuo would be. Any thoughts on that, please leave a comment in the chat. 726, they received a diplomatic mission with a group of 13 people with the leader named Suleiman. I wonder, have I made a mistake with the slides here? I think we've done this one already. Let's move on. 727. Okay, so this one is in Chinese, which I'm going to jump on to the rest of it here. Luo and the lord of the exotic Persian city, Abbasid. Now, this was done by Google Translation because my Chinese contact didn't translate this, and I have no idea exactly if this is a correct translation, but I give it to you for what it's worth. The one that kind of made me think this is a bit weird. The 100 boils were returned because of the edict. So were the Taye offering 100 boils? It doesn't seem likely that they would offer that to the Chinese unless this was some sort of voodoo kind of thing, or some sort of weird sort of magical thing that they were offering the Chinese. But anyway, the Chinese weren't having any of it and returned the gift. It's probably a bad translation, and it's thrown up a weird thing. It also goes on to say the book proclaims the Buddhist vow. No idea what that is referring to. And then it says the king, it doesn't make clear whether it's the Chinese or Arab, still gave him a robe, a belt, and a horse. So it could mean that the Arabs gave the Chinese court a robe and a belt and a horse. Okay. Now, they also received a diplomatic mission from a group of 8 people with the leader named Tibet Duo from the Dashi. Again, I've no idea what that could be in Arabic. Any guesses there? Tibet Duo doesn't ring a bell. So I really could do with an Arabic speaker that might be able to kind of get a sense of what that name might be. So that could be helpful. Okay. 729. So we're heading towards the end of the Umayyad period now. Received invoice presenting tribute from Dashi. 730. The Prince of Persia named Ji Ho Suo personally led a mission to the Tang royal court, presented rhinoceroses, horns, and incenses as tribute. Okay. Obviously, the Chinese would have appreciated the rhinoceros horns for their Chinese medicine. Okay. 732 in September, the king of Persia dispatched his chief Panami. Okay, Panami. Again, I don't know what that would be in Persian. And religious leader Ji Li, presenting tribute to the Tang royal court. The year of the monkey, 732. So the king of Dashi dispatched a diplomatic mission with its leader named Mo Su Lan Dagan to the Tang court. This is from the old Tibetan annals. So this is not a Chinese source this time, but a Tibetan one. The king of Dashi dispatched a diplomatic mission with his leader named Mo Su Lan Dagan to the Tang court. 737, the Prince of Poshi, Prince of Persia, named Ji Hu So, personally led a mission to the Tang royal court. 741, so we're almost at the end of the Umayyad period now. The chief of Dashi named Haisha, Caliph Hisham is suggested here, who was Caliph from 724 to 743. He personally arrived at the Tang royal court and paid homage to the emperor. He was rewarded with a noble purple robe and golden lace belt by the emperor. So it's obviously he's trying to keep the Chinese on side. Okay. And it's probably, he's probably trying to reassure the Chinese, we're not going to attack China. We're just taking over some lands along the Silk Road, 744. Entitled the king of Tuobasidan, which is Tabaristan, as king of Ganghua, which means submissive. So the submissive king, I think that would mean. Tabaristan would be the northern Iran, just south of the Caspian Sea, or just on the coast of the Caspian Sea there. No. 744, in the month of July, the Chinese received invoice presenting horses and jewels as tribute from the Dashi. So the Arabs are keen to keep the Chinese happy. They're probably continuing the various battles and wars in different places, but they're buttering up the Chinese. And then 745, they received invoice from Persia again with tribute. 745 received invoice presenting tribute from Heiyao, which I've looked up, and I think it means united. So the United State of Dashi. So this might suggest that the Dashi now have pulled together different states, perhaps part of Persia. So that might be a significant marker there of things changing. And now we have 746. The king of Tabaristan dispatched invoice presenting 40 horses as tribute. And we also have in 746, the Chinese received invoice presenting rhinoceroses and elephants as tribute from Ibo Dabu, the governor of Husi State. I've no idea where Husi State. I guess on my part is maybe Khorasan. If you've got a better suggestion, leave it in the comments below, but that seems the closest I can get to it. Now, this is a weird one. This is from 746. The king of Tabaristan dispatched invoice presenting a 1,000-year-old date as tribute. So maybe they preserved it in a pickle jar or something, but there you go. 747 received invoice presenting a gas chair, which is kind of like a marble chair. So this, not just a run-of-the-mill wooden chair. This would have taken a lot of craftsmanship to do. And that was from the Persians, of course. And again from Tabaristan, the Chinese entitled the king of Tabaristan as the king of Guizhen, which means honored, trustworthy. Now, what's interesting is this trustworthy, that's often a title given to Muhammad as well. Is there any connection there, I wonder? Or is that just a coincidence? Now, I love this one. There's a bit, maybe I'm reading into it, but there seems to be a bit of competition. So the Persians sent a tribute of 4 leopards, whereas the Dashi sent 6 leopards. It's not, you can just imagine how it's like one-man upmanship between the two. It could be a coincidence, but it seems kind of strange anyway. Received invoice presenting carpets of big and long type. That's the Chinese translation. Pearls without holes as tribute from the Poshi, the Persians. So basically, pearls, maybe I suppose you could say in the raw state or original state. Okay. Now, notice the year. This is just on the cusp of the switch over into the period of the Abbasids. Okay, 751. At the Battle of Talas, Du Wan, a Chinese guy, gets captured as a prisoner of war. He writes that when the followers of the Confession of Dashi drink alcohol, they behave in a ridiculous and undisciplined way the whole day. So he noticed that when he was traveling through Arabia. I don't know which of the or through Arabian lands. So it could have been Iraq, it could have been northern Arabia, it could have been parts of Syria. It's not clear, but he wasn't particularly impressed by the way they drink. He also says, according to their customs, every 7th day is a holiday on which no trade and no cash transactions are done. This suggests that they are still keeping up a Christian custom of not working on Sunday, which is the 7th day. That's how I would read it. And also he refers to, when he's traveling in Eastern Africa, he refers to 3 religions. One is that of the Dashi, one is that of the Fulen, which is the Byzantines or the East Romans, and the third one he calls the Zimzem. And this is clearly a reference to Zoroastrianism, because people like oh god, his name is gone. Al-Tabari basically refers to various versions of Zimzem in reference to the Zoroastrians. Okay. Now, what else? So, 752 December. Shi Duo Hemi, the king of Heyi, the Abbasids, or Dashi, dispatched envoys to the Tang royal court. Now, someone in the comments earlier on today told me that Heyi refers to black. Okay, Heyi, so black Dashi. Now, we know from standard Islamic narrative that the Abbasids wore black, so that would fit nicely, and it's a good confirmation. So that's what distinguished them from the Tayaye, whatever color the Tayaye wore. I think it might have been white, perhaps. The Karens, of course, wore green. Now, we also have from 753, this report. The Japanese and Korean envoys were quarreling at the Tang court, and the Japanese envoy, so the Dashi envoys. Okay, so just said that they saw them. That's all. 755. The Prince Zihui Lu of Tuo Basidan, or Tabaristan, arrived at the royal court and stayed, and was hired as a palace royal guard. Do you notice how often visitors to China say, "Can I stay here? Can I work here? Don't send me back to that awful place." So we see that again and again. Now we also have from 756 to 758. Another saying is that the ruling clan of the Dashi, the Taye tribe, is called Guli, which is rendered Quraysh, during the year of K. Huan, 581 to 600 AD of the Su dynasty. There are two families within the Guli tribe. One family is called Penni Zishin, or Banu Hashim, and the other is called Penni Mohuan, or Banu Marwan. So what you see in the 750s is now we got a new story. We don't see any reference, or at least there seems to be a replacement of the Tayayi here going on, where there's a reference now to the Quraysh and the Banu Marwan. So they seem to be kind of pushing out the references to the Tayayi, which is what typically happens when you take over, you write the other group out of history. Okay. So the funny thing about it was that the Tang government noticed something odd when they received the invoice during those years. They were told a completely different story of how the Dashi were founded. So you remember the earlier story was that there was a guy herding camels, and then this lineman comes along, and this happened way up in northern Iraq, right? That was the story 100 years before this. Now there's this new story, okay? And so you have these two groups, the Banu Hashim and the Banu Marwan, okay? And then it says, there was a man from Penny Zishin called Mo Kimo, which some scholars render as Muhammad, who was very brave and wise and was hailed as the king by the tribe people. The king, Mo Kimo, then expanded the kingdom's territory, stretching across 3,000 leagues from east to west with his mighty forces. He also conquered the city of Ziala, which is Syria, which is called City Shan, Damascus. Okay, so what this is saying is that the person who founded the Tayaye is Muhammad. Okay, but they can see that this is different from the earlier story. Okay, first of all, there's a name now called Muhammad introduced, which wasn't there before. Okay. So now we have 757, the month of September. General Guang Ping led a troop of 200,000, which comprises soldiers from Suofang, which is the North Military District, Anxi, West Military District, the Uyghurs, Southern Barbarian, and Dashi, to head eastward to quell the Lushan rebels. So it's interesting that the Dashi and the Chinese had an alliance against these rebels in China. Okay, so all of that diplomatic activity for the previous number of years obviously paid off. So the Chinese and the Arabs kind of kept a good relationship. 758, according to a local Guangzhou government report, Dashi and Persian pirates raided and looted warehouses in Guangzhou. So it's just off the map here, so I can't quite show you. So you have to imagine that those ships are heading a little bit further eastward along the southern coast of China. That's where it is located. The way it's done there, it seems like the Persians are independently acting from the Dashi here, with the pirates. It could be that they are referring to them as Persians, but maybe they're all part of the same group. It's hard to say, really. 759 received invoice named Li Muo Ri Yi, presenting tribute from Poshi, the Persians. The envoy feasted with the emperor in the inner court, which obviously shows a great sign of respect and so forth. I don't know what this name would be in Persian. So again, if you have any ideas, if you speak Persian, perhaps you can fill us in on that one. 762 received invoice presenting tribute from the Persians. See how late that is. That's 130 years into at least 150 years into the expansion of the Tayaye, and yet the Persians are still, as you can see, independent of the Tayaye. 762 received invoice presenting tribute from the Persians again. 769 received invoice presenting tribute from Heyi Dashi, the Abbasids, the Black Tayaye, as it were. Okay. I automatically think of my initial thing is the Black Tayaye in terms of clothing. I wonder, could it be a reference to them being dark-skinned? Is that possible? Could the Abbasids, this is literally, as I'm looking at it, is that possible? If so, where are they coming from exactly? Any thoughts on that one? And received invoice presenting pearls and amber from the Persians. And then finally in 801 AD, the Tang troop defeats Nam Zhu, a buffer state between the Tang and the Tibet, and found captives from Heyi Dashi. Okay, so that is that. Tell us what you thought in the comments below. I hope you found this helpful, and I'm going to end it here. And thank you all for dropping by. Hope this kind of filled in quite a bit.